Okay, hey, what's happening? Looks like everything is live. All systems are go. This is Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. The new mic effect. Yeah, got the new mic effect. New mic effect. What's happening, everybody? Let me do a few greetings over on the YouTube side of things. See what's going on over there. Okay, morning. Morning to you. Morning, morning, morning. There's Joan S. There's Joe Dimitri, Ian Barber, the purple one, Paulette Hanson, Judy from Missouri, Phoebe Kane. Hi, Phoebe Kane. Justice Moody. The Justice is in the house. Jenny Beasley. All right. The force is assembling. Let me go over to the other side. Let's see what's happening over there. Let's do a little morning on the 15 minutes side. There we go. All right. Good. Good, 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 good. It's like we've got a whopping 23 people watching right now. Oh, 24. He's not a watcher though. He's a destroyer. He's a destroyer god. He's a destroyer cat god. Yes. Yes, Jasper, you're gonna show your butt to everybody. Everybody show your butt and try it out. So, Jasper, we have a new thing here with the microphone. Maybe you'd like to say a few words. You know, I'm sure if I didn't treat Jasper, oh god, I was reaching for some kind of surreal analogy, but if I didn't treat Jasper really really well, I think I'd be getting letters from PETA. He's cruel to his cat. He tosses his cat off of his show when his cat, all his cat wants to do is be loved and petted. I'm not big enough to boycott. I hope I'm never big enough to boycott. Let's put it that way. I'd rather be an underground sensation. I've always liked indie rock better than corporate rock. Let's put it that way. Some of you liked the show yesterday, where I kind of got into the popular music, unpopular music scene that we're in. I had a really great discussion with Stephen Kent yesterday. You know, Stephen's going to be performing here in the Hill Country in October at the Harvest Moon Hill Country event. And Stephen and I have known each other since the early 90s. And we talked about the music scene. And Stephen, in addition to being a musician, he's also a very, how do I say this, well-read. He's a musicologist, and particularly with what they call world music or international music. So he's had a radio show on KPFA since the 90s, early 90s, Music of the World. Great, great show. And so Stephen knows a lot of the kind of the world music scene, which I was super familiar with when I was living in California. I mean, it was a great, great scene. You know, there's a lot of really interesting crossovers. And one of my favorite groups during that time, outside of Transmission, who was in the Bay Area, was a group from England called Afro Celt Sound System. It was incredible, that group. They had people who were obviously, you know, Celtic, right? So they're coming from that sort of, you know, Riverdance world, but, you know, a little more sophisticated than that. And then they had some musicians from Africa, and they had a guy, I think, from Pakistan, kind of a Bhangra guy in there. It was like, wow, this is incredible, man. I saw Afro Celt Sound System at Peter Gabriel's WOMAD Festival, which was a great festival, World of Music and Dance. So it was a really interesting time musically, and I was talking with Stephen about just the state of music, and even in that world, like there's not much happening. And he should know. I mean, that's his world, and it just seems like all these stories that were being told musically just ended, right? Or there are very few new stories being written around the whole musical paradigm in our lives, the musical world. And music is such a rich addition to our lives, that it's unfortunate that it is being essentially phased out in a lot of ways. And the attention span for it was really, really funny, because I did that show yesterday on music, and I was listening to a local talk show here, one out of San Antonio, and they kind of went on a very similar sort of riff. And the host was talking about how his grandkids don't even really listen to a full song anymore. They listen to a minute of a song and then they're on to something else. So it was very, very interesting. Something's in the air. Something's in the air, and it's not Jasper's tail. I'll tell you that right now. His tail's down here. Jasper, do you have any words of wisdom you want to pass on to anybody out there? Anything you want to say? All right, I'll say it for you. So today's show, I'm going to go to probably for about an hour and try to get in as much as possible. Lot to cover today. Here comes the butt. Doing the butt. Remember that song? Doing the butt. By EU. Experience Unlimited. From Spike Lee. Spike Lee is actually a very talented filmmaker. Even though I don't always like his movies, I think he's still a very talented filmmaker. See, you can disagree with somebody and still appreciate their craft. Isn't that a wonderful thing to do? Anyway, Spike Lee, one of his films was School Days. It's a kind of an interesting film, but it's also a film where you kind of want to throw a not honestly want to throw a brick at your screen, but it's like it's very real. The thing I like about School Days is it really captures what it's like to attend a black university, which Spike Lee did. And it gives you some insight into the various cultures inside that system, particularly around the late 80s, early 90s. Very, very, there aren't many films like that. The political stuff, but there's a really interesting scene in that movie. This is where Spike Lee, I think, gets it. On some level, he gets it. He didn't get it enough. He could have knocked it out of the park with that documentary on Katrina, but he pulled a few too many punches. I guess he wanted to make movies still. Anyway, there's a scene in School Days where the kids, the young guys who are at the college, go out for, I think, KFC. And then there's a group of guys from the area who don't go to college. And there's this kind of culture clash that takes place inside of that KFC. And the sort of the ringleader of the, how should I say, the local gentry is Samuel L. Jackson. And there's this debate about, they get into this kind of heated debate about, like, who the fuck are you? You come here for 4 years and you leave, and the game is rigged, and don't you understand that, or are you just going to be like a kind of a sellout Tom? I mean, it's an interesting sort of dialogue between sort of two groups or two subsets of a group, and actually very honest, I thought. It's not a great film, but there's some interesting elements to it. All right, so Jasper is probably going to relocate himself here soon. I think here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fake Jasper out. I'm going to fake him out. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to come on here and I'm going to pretend to do the show for about maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, so that he can do that, right? So that he can do that and then go go, have his perch on the other side of the computer. I'm going to fake him out. So that way, when showtime comes, maybe he'll make a brief cameo and then he'll relocate, which he's about to do right now. Don't tell him. Don't tell him we're going to do this. Okay, he's got his own email address now. Maybe I'll give out Jasper's email address tomorrow, so you guys can send an email if you want. Of course, be some sick fuck out there.
I hope you fucking die, you cat. You're being exploited, don't you know that?
Animals of the world, unite! All right, so we're going to get into some stuff today. Let's get into some stuff. I wanted to get into a little bit of astrology. Here's the chart of the moment. Oh, look at that beautiful chart of the moment. Have you ever seen such a beautiful assemblage of the planets, the sign Virgo? Look at all that Virgo. Virgo rising. Venus in Virgo. Mercury in Virgo. Sun in Virgo. Mars in Virgo. Sun, Mars, 11 degrees. 11 degrees, 22. And look at that nice, clean, grand trine. It's a pristine, an absolutely pristine geometric pattern that a Virgo can appreciate. Now, we've got the opposition going on with Neptune. Kind of fouls things up. Neptune fouls things up. And then it's we've actually got a T-square. But the Jupiter T-square to basically everything in Virgo. And then Neptune, Jupiter's just starting to move past Neptune now. It is just kind of lurching towards its liberation from Neptune. In that locked-down square that we've been dealing with, which has made it very, very difficult to get to the bottom of the foggy bottom. And will we ever get to the bottom of the foggy bottom? Good question. I saw a great interview. I'll get back to the chart here. Saw a great interview with Ed Zoll. Is that his name? Ed Zoll? Ed Zoll? The guy from True News, and he was talking with this guy from New Mexico, who's a radio talk host / DJ there. And man, this guy from New Mexico just had this thing nailed down with Zorro Ranch, and they've been following Epstein for a while. The relationship with Epstein and Zorro Ranch goes all the way back to the 90s. Actually, the relationship with Epstein and Bill Richardson goes all the way back to the 90s. Zorro Ranch is a part of that story. And that's where they were doing their little eugenics experiments. That's where they were getting babies from the girls, right? Impregnating them. It was a super interesting interview. Very, very, very interesting interview. And Epstein stuff is going to come up again. It's not going to go away. It is not going to go away, but it will come up. And I'm targeting the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio at the right around the 27th degree or thereafter. That's my 2 cents. All right, so we got all this Virgo happening right now. Get things done. Get things done. Get moving. Make things happen. The Jupiter squares are not bad. I mean, it's like you can over exaggerate maybe a little bit. Maybe you can have a bigger idea. I think that square with Jupiter to Virgo is good. It's like it gets Virgo out of its tight quarters. It says, come on, let's go. Bigger ideas. Let's go. There's more out there. Yeah. Take care of the details, but go on out there after you do. There's big game afoot here. That's happening, and of course, the trine with Uranus is really coming on with the Sun and Mars. Well, it's actually, we go back a few days ago, about 5 days ago, last week. The Sun was in exact trine with Uranus. So it's still there, and it's part of the party. And then we have the trine to Saturn and Pluto with the Sun and Mars. I mean, this is a great time to get things done. Clear off your desks, clear up the cobwebs, exercise, move, work, all those fantastic Virgoan things. Neptune, of course, in opposition, might make it a little bit more difficult. Maybe I'll sit this one out. Maybe I'll take a little time out. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do not succumb to the narcoleptic energies of Neptune. That's okay. I mean, the Neptune opposition is like, how can we maintain a sense of peace and love and compassion and empathy while not missing the details, while holding fast to the things that are important to get done and taken care of, looking after your own self-interest in a very Virgoan sort of way. It's not bad. It's the least egoic sign in the zodiac. So this chart is going to have a bit of a resonance as we move into the show. You'll see later. We've got Moon in Scorpio today. Moon in Scorpio. Yes, intense, dark, gothic. In that moon is actually in sextile with the outer planets, or not the outer planets, my bad. Sort of the outer reaches of that stellium, specifically Venus, as we speak. And also it is kind of in a wide sextile with Neptune. It's an interesting energy, very interesting. And I think it's a pretty clean chart. Get stuff done. That is my mantra of the day. The topic of the show of the day is about something called Cloward Piven, which I have talked about before. Some of you know what Cloward Piven is. And in case you don't, I'm going to fill it in for you. So, this is the flow chart that we are going to get to. But before we do that, this is Frances Fox Piven. Looks like she needs a bit of a shave there. And then we have Richard Cloward. It looks like if Richard took those glasses off and put them in the sun, he might be able to create a laser beam effect with those things. Anyway, let me give you a little bit of background on Cloward Piven. This is really the Wikipedia story. It's the Cloward Piven strategy. So Richard Cloward and Frances Fox Piven, they were sociologists, American sociologists and political activists, and they taught at Columbia. They were professors at the Columbia University School of Social Work. So they had a strategy that they put into place, and it was outlined in the quote-unquote liberal magazine, The Nation. And the strategy is called The Weight of the Poor, a strategy to end poverty. The two stated that many Americans who were eligible for welfare were not receiving benefits, and that a welfare enrollment drive would strain local budgets, precipitating a crisis at the state and local levels that would be a wake-up call for the federal government, particularly the Democratic Party. There would also be side consequences of this strategy, according to Cloward Piven. These would include easing the plight of the poor in the short term through their participation in the welfare system, shoring up support for the National Democratic Party, then splintered by pluralistic interests through its cultivation of poor minority constituencies by implementing a national solution to poverty and relieving local governments of the financially and politically onerous burdens of public welfare through a national solution to poverty. So this is what they did. Okay. And I'll get back into the strategy a bit more here. Cloward and Piven's article is focused on forcing the Democratic Party, which in 1966 controlled the presidency, and both houses of the United States of Congress. Think about that now. 1966, Johnson's president, Democrats controlled the House right? Both the houses of the Congress. And both houses to take federal action to help the poor. I don't think they control the Senate. Interesting. They stated that the full enrollment of those eligible for welfare would produce bureaucratic disruption in welfare agencies and fiscal disruption in political and state governments that would deepen existing divisions among elements of the big city Democratic coalition. The remaining white middle class, the working class ethnic groups, and the growing minority poor. To avoid further weakening of that historic coalition, the National Democratic Administration would be constrained to advance a federal solution to poverty that would override local welfare failures, local class and racial conflicts, and local revenue dilemmas. So part of what they were doing with this strategy was not only were they going to crash the system, which they did in New York, in the state of New York, or New York City. They crashed the system in New York City. But they also saw this as a unifying principle because the Democratic Party was much more fractal during that time. It wasn't like we are now socialists, which is what's happening today. So in a lot of ways, what we're seeing with Ocasio-Cortez, with Ilhan Omar, Tlaib, any number of red flag waving social justice warriors, social democracy, what we're seeing now is we're seeing the implementation of the Cloward Piven strategy once again so that they can essentially unify the party and not have these kind of splintered divisions where there are some Democrats who want to work with the so-called right, or there are some Democrats that are more kind of working class middle. No, that's gone. That's out the window. Because if you look at what's happening, and I'll detail what's happening. Cloward Piven is being employed both on the streets of America and on the borders of America, and the two are working hand in glove to become theoretically this unifying principle inside the Democratic Party. And I'll talk more about that. But in order to understand Cloward Piven, we have to look at the flow chart and see who all the players are that are involved in the strategy that changed America, changed the world irrevocably, and most likely not for the better. And by the way, I just have to have a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is I do not support heavy-duty, free market economy where the upper 1% is running that game either. Because, frankly, I'm not set up for that in my life. And even if I was, I'm not sure I could go along with the program. So I just want to be clear. The people that are part of the chat room, you know that that's true. Or at least I think you know it's true. But if you're new to this, you know, I'm not sitting here banging my Sean Hannity fist down on the podium here. This is a program for people that think, and this is a program for people that like to pull things apart, and this is a program for people that like to stay as clear as possible, but at the same time understanding, you know what's in the hunt, where the game is right now. And so if you're new to the program, just hang in there. You'll kind of see how this goes and how we pull it all together to the best way that we possibly can, even with a little astrology involved too. Okay, so here's the flow chart that I'm talking about. So this is the Cloward Piven strategy of orchestrated crisis, the radical left, and Barack Obama. So this is an Obama era chart, but it's very important because this gives you an understanding of kind of what people are up against in a lot of ways. I mean, this is a very, very sophisticated series of networks. And I don't think Obama is just cruising around the world and hanging out with George Clooney at Lake Cuomo, or just occupying his beautiful new Cape Cod house, which is dangerously close to sea level. I don't think he's just hanging out. I think that a lot of what we're seeing now, a lot of what's happening on the streets of America through the corporations, potentially with Gladio-styled events that are taking place across America, in the streets of our once great cities, and on the border of this country, there is an orchestrated movement and an orchestrated plan. And people like Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice and Susan Power and Cass Sunstein, they don't just go away. Some of them will kind of go back into academia and teach and brainwash as many kids as possible. But generally, they go into think tanks, they go into foundations, and they go into their NGOs, and they continue to do what they do, even though they're outside of the White House. And I would make a case here that Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and the Obama gang are more than likely still directing the action and the traffic behind the scenes. And I'm not yeah. Look, I've got feelings about Obama. I think he was a total fraud. He was a total fraud. He was a total CIA creation. And he was one of the worst things that happened to this country recently in terms of the presidency. But I'll put George W. Bush right up there, right alongside with him. They're 1A and 1B. So again, just keeping it real. Just keeping it real, balancing it out. Bill Clinton was right up there in the rogues gallery, and so was G.H.W. Bush. I mean, the four of them all together. I mean, think of that now. Think about from G.H.W. Bush, who was basically running the second term of Reagan's presidency. Let's be clear about that. So that's 4 years there. And another 4 years after that, that's 8 years. And then we've got 8 years of Clinton, so that's 16 years. And then we've got 8 years of Bush. That's another 16 years. That's 32 years. And then we've got another 16 years of I'm sorry. Let me go back. My math is wrong. We've got 8 for Reagan Bush. That's 8. 8 more for Clinton. That's 16, right? Then we have 8 more for Bush Jr. That's 24. And then we have 8 more for Obama. That's 32. You know what 32 years represents? A generation. And there's very little difference between Obama and Bush and Clinton and Bush. There's very, very little difference between all of them. Obama didn't automatically stop our war in the Middle East. Nope, didn't do it. Obama didn't repeal the Patriot Act. Obama didn't do a lot of the things that perhaps a president who wanted to make things right could have and would have done. 32 years worth of succession leading to where we were on November in 2016 when Donald John Trump was elected. So let's look at the flow chart here. So it all starts with CPUSA. And CPUSA is very real. It's been around for a very long time. It's deeply, deeply funded. We have George Soros down at the bottom, the Open Society, run by the SDS founder, that's Students for Democratic Society, R.A. Neller. This is a few years old, so that leadership may have transitioned. But over here, we also have the Tides Foundation, which is another George Soros operated group that comes through the Alinsky column. So on one column, we have CPUSA. On the other column, we have Alinsky, who, of course, wrote Rules for Radicals and is a major influence in the life of Hillary Clinton, Bill Ayers, Barack Obama, and everything that comes out of Chicago. So we start with CPUSA and the other radical socialist groups, which are quite real and well-funded. And then we have the New Left, which is the Red Diaper Babies. So the new left comes basically through like children of the 60s, right? They're the Red Diaper Babies. Children of the 60s and children of the 70s, early 70s. And then we have SDS, Students for Democratic Society, This was the brainchild of Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, the Weather Underground, with no doubt connections to intelligence agencies, the CIA, FBI, perhaps even the NSA. There's a lot of very interesting connections between SDS. SDS comes on the scene and basically takes the anti-war movement away from the existing leaders of the anti-war movement. And Bernadine Dorn and Bill Ayers are exhorting people to drop acid and kill the man. And ultimately were very effective in their own way. We have Carl Davidson Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, Carl Davidson New Party, and of course Soros. And from Soros, we've got money going to Media Matters, MoveOn.org, Narrow Now. And Cloward Piven plays this really key role right in the center. George Wiley's NWRO implements strategy. So George Wiley was somebody who was living in New York City, and Cloward Piven basically drafted him. He was a black American, connected to sort of the more radical elements inside that community, likely a CPUSA member himself. But we have George Wiley, who's the boots on the ground, right? He's the guy that Cloward Piven, because Cloward Piven, they're just ideologues. You know, they're creating the playbook. They need players, and George Wiley was their quarterback on the streets of New York City. He organized strikes. He organized sit-ins. He began to make the argument that at the time, the mayor of New York City, John Lindsay, and the New York City government were racists. So of course, the race card was being thrown into circulation, and George Wiley was very effective, very, very effective as a social organizer. Right? He was very, very effective, and he implemented the Cloward Piven strategy. And New York City went bankrupt. They went bankrupt. And then below that, you've got Acorn, and Acorn being at that time, I'm not sure Acorn is still around. They got busted big time, right? By Veritas, Project Veritas. So Linsky or Bill Ayers comes from both sides. He comes from both columns. You can see him over here. So you've got Wade Rathke, Bill Ayers, and Carl Davidson. This is the new left, the red diaper babies. This is who they are, and they're implemented all throughout this, right? So Wade Rathke becomes the head of Acorn. Carl Davidson has his own committees for correspondence for democracy and social. Sounds very, very civilized, doesn't it? But over here, you'll see Bill Ayers again, you know, coming kind of out of the Alinsky column, or through the Alinsky column. So Saul Alinsky Industrial Areas Foundation, birthplace of Alinsky, community organizing method. So George Wiley was a community organizer, and he was, again, incredibly effective. And of course, Wade Rathke has a relationship with George Wiley. It helps him create dissent. We have money coming in. We have the Woods Fund. We have the Chicago Annenberg Challenge, which is also connected to Bill Ayers. Tides, incredibly big, moves the Tides Foundation, is a foundation that has a lot of other sub-foundations underneath it. And Tides Foundation was probably kind of at the center of what was happening back in, oh boy, right around, 2011, right? 2011, where all of a sudden, all across America, well, it started in New York, and it was Occupy Wall Street. And the Tides Foundation was, I think, instrumental in funding and organizing Occupy Wall Street. So I was at Zuccotti Square in New York City. I was there early on, like within the first 10 days of the Occupy Wall Street. And it was amazing what they had set up in terms of computers, in terms of live streaming. There was a lot of money. This was not your hey, let's get together and hang out at Zuccotti Park and let's kind of shut it down and do. No, they had generators. I mean, they had a lot going on there, and it was very sophisticated. They had a network of people on, brand new uh, MacBook Pros. They were streaming live. It was a big deal, and of course, they had their programs and their speakers and their marches. And I was there and I watched it. It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Tides Foundation basically funded it, and of course, down in the right corner, you've got Barack Hussein Obama. So this gives you kind of this, 40,000 foot view of the Cloward Piven network. Okay, so why am I bringing this up today? Why am I talking? Well, some of you have asked me to talk about Cloward Piven, so I'm talking about it. Let me make sure I have the right. Yeah, we're good. We're good on the stream side. Okay. So the other reason I'm talking about Cloward Piven is because they're using it again. It's being implemented on us through at least two crises. And right now, what we're dealing with is we're dealing with 4 major crises, and we're about to be dealing with 5. So let me just give you an example of Cloward Piven in action. Here's your streets of Los Angeles. And this is a scene that is becoming all too familiar with America's cities. Now, in order to understand this, you have to understand the leadership in America's cities, which are roughly probably, I'm just throwing a dart here, I'm saying they're about 90% Democrat, liberal, in America's big cities. And probably even some of the middle cities too. Okay, they're choke points. Cities are a choke point. And mayors have been extremely useful in implementing a national or international agenda at a local level. They've been invaluable to that extent. Under Coleman Young, the mayor of Detroit, the longtime mayor of Detroit, Detroit basically went from a vibrant manufacturing city to a city that was deeply immersed in crack wars and the not whores, crack wars, and being transformed from a vibrant kind of industrial marketplace to something far less than that, and actually probably one of the poorest cities in the country, with just incredible examples of urban blight. And so Coleman Young is just one example of what happens when you have a liberal mayor in office for an extended period of time. They implement the plan, they implement the agenda, and the agenda is to take away viable economic structure. And we've seen this in a number of cities across America, but Detroit being, of course, sort of the fountainhead of it all. So here we go. Now the homeless are being deployed basically across the country in record numbers, and something that's not often talked about, but should be. And so what Cloward Piven, how this relates to Cloward Piven, is that they're using the homeless to break the system. So let's say all the homeless in San Francisco or Sacramento, Sacramento had a lot of really great commentary from that Sacramento piece. And people who live in that area were basically echoing what I was talking about. And it was a big deal. When I said that they were dropping people off from Reno to Sacramento, they knew what I was talking about. And apparently the people that they were dropping off were from mental institutions. I was like, okay, we're closing shop here. Here's a ticket, get on the bus and go to Sacramento. That's what they did. And people were up in arms and not happy about the whole thing. And they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be happy. It is. It's not that there's derelict leadership. I don't think it's derelict at all. I think it's demonic leadership. and then a lot of convenience thrown in, and a little bit of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Anyway, the homeless are now being deployed. Why are they being deployed? How did they get there? How did they become homeless in the first place? Well, it's because they started offshoring a lot of our manufacturing. They started to put their chokehold on places like Detroit, where automobile manufacturing employed a number of people, and not just quote unquote white people. There are a number of black Americans who worked in those automobile plants. They're still there, you know. They still make some cars in Michigan and some trucks in Michigan, but it's not the way it used to be. It's not like the heyday of Detroit in the 60s and the 70s. So they basically have done their best to shut down that kind of industrialization while working hand in glove with the globalists to open up the overseas markets in places like China and Pakistan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea. This is kind of an extension of the Marshall Plan post-World War II. And this is what happened. So now you've got people who, I don't have a job anymore. You know, I think Michael Moore. There are some people who think Michael Moore is a woman. I don't think he is. I've actually seen a video of Michael Moore when he was a high schooler, and he was debating Paul Volcker, or was that a Paul Volcker talk? And he was there asking him questions. Very young Michael Moore. Anyway, Michael Moore did do one film that I thought was pretty genius. It's called Roger and Me, and it was about him, and at that time the guy who was the head of GM, and Michael Moore went to Flint, Michigan, where they used to make cars, and they don't make cars there anymore. Obviously, they didn't make cars at the time of the movie. But what Michael Moore failed to realize was that it wasn't that GM was trying to scale their profits up by solely by relocating a plant, say, in Mexico. But it was also GM was being hamstrung on the local level in Detroit and in Michigan by higher taxes, higher insurance rates for their employees. I mean, all the stuff that makes business harder to do, they made it harder. So what did GM do? They said, okay, we're going to shut this down. We're going to go to Mexico. But he couldn't connect the dots. But anyway, it's a fairly interesting film. So we have the homeless problem has a lot to do with the fact that we have a workless problem, right? That's a big deal. People are not making the same amount of money. They have to work 3 jobs. They're barely hanging on. People live in hotel rooms. They live in their cars. I've seen stories of families living in cars with kids. The kids have to go to school from their car. You see how this is breaking the system? So we start off with basically decapitating the industrial sector of this country through a number of different ways and means. Taxes, higher insurance, environmental regulations, and some of those things are actually probably okay. We don't want companies dumping their industrial waste sewage in our rivers. No. We'll let them do it in our water supply, aka fluoride, but there's a reason why some of these things do exist, because they need to be looked at, watched over. But we have a group of homeless who are suffering now from really about, I'd say, 2 decades worth of hardcore outsourcing, offshoring. That's one part of it. The other part, of course, is the drug issue. And that's another war that's being waged on Americans. And Misaki and I talked about that on Friday. And fentanyl is the new opium. And the opium war has been redirected in this country's direction. So you have people who are homeless, or not homeless, but they're kind of home stressed. They don't have a job, or they've gone through a series of jobs. They've burnt themselves out after working on, 3 jobs to make ends meet. Food is really good. Food is expensive, so they eat shit food. Processed food leads to health problems. It's a vicious, vicious cycle. And then they just want relief. They want some kind of holiday from their pain, right? So what do? They take drugs. Maybe it starts off they hurt themselves, or maybe a friend of a friend says, "Hey man, I got something for you," and next thing you know, they're taking oxy or they're taking fentanyl, and at that point, it's a long ride back from that. And so now we have this population that's been weaponized on the streets of America. Oh my God, look, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Oh, there's such an see, they'll wake up to the homeless problem when they feel like it. When they say, we've got a problem here, look, this is income inequality. We've got to do something about it. So they're creating the problem. This is part of the problem, reaction, solution. That old game. That's what's happening. So right now, we're being faced with another crisis that's happening simultaneously. And it's another Cloward Piven manufactured event. Here we go. So we have the displacement of people coming from outside the country, and we have the displacement of people inside the country, and along with it, a significant amount of cognitive dissonance. Look at that kid's wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. Where do you get that? A lot of cognitive dissonance, because for these people, they're going to be fast tracked. They're going to be fast tracked to a much better situation. They're going to get IDs, they can get passports, they'll get welfare, they'll get health care. So they are going to get fast tracked. And of course, that'll put a burden on the system too. These people are not getting fast tracked. Not until the time comes when all of a sudden, when it becomes politically expedient, oh, America's got a homeless crisis. And then the left will jump on it. But for now, they're jumping on this. Why? Because these people are not in the same kind of desperate straits as these people. Now I ask you, do you think these people vote? That's a hell to the no. Because these people know that the system fucked them over. Maybe, just maybe, somebody in a van will come by on election day and promise to give them $100 and a free meal if they can go out and cast a ballot or 2 or 3. This group here, well, guess what? They got something to be thankful for, because they've been moved into a new country. They're going to have a new start. They're going to have everything they need in order to be successful, feet on the ground. And who do you think they're going to be beholden to? They're going to be beholden to the people that were their Sherpas, that got them across the border and told them, when you get there, we're going to stay in touch with you. We're going to track you. We're going to know who you are. And we're going to make sure that when there's an election, we can count on you. And you'll be able to vote for us and the people that have supported you. So we can see again that there is a weaponization of the homeless taking place. The homeless being displaced. And by the way, I'm sure some of these people have homes. But they're leaving them. They're leaving them because they know they're getting a better deal here. On some level, I don't blame them. What would you do? If you were living in a country that was being essentially run by a banana dictator, and there was a high degree of crime, a high degree of poverty, a high degree of the heavy hand of the local fascisti, also known as the police, armed squads, what would you do? Somebody said, hey, you go to the United States and you get all these benefits and get out of here. What would you do? You'd probably say, I'm walking. So, oh no, you don't have to walk. We got a bus for you. If it was more than an equal playing field, or close to an equal playing field, I would assume that a lot of these people would like to stay. But it's not. So we've created a disparity in these parts of the world. We being not us, but our good pals, the globalists, the internationalists, who will go in and essentially plunder the resources and make things very difficult. I'm starting to sound like a communist, aren't I? But this is real. This is true. This is what's happening. It's being essentially activated. So they're going to break the system. They're in the process of breaking the system. This is what Cloward Piven is about. And ultimately, the goal is to flip Cloward Piven, or to flip the crisis of the situation into a system that, for all intents and purposes, resembles socialism, communism. And by doing so, what do we see? We see that the party becomes united under one wing, and that's what AOC and Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar have been tasked with. They've been tasked with unifying the Democratic Party, and unifying the Democratic Party under the aegis of socialism through the Cloward Piven machinations. When you see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hit the border, what she's doing is she's pulling a Cloward Piven move. She is not a legislator. She's not a legislator. And if she represented me in New York City, I'd be pissed off. What she is she's an agitator and an organizer. She's using her position and the media who supports her in order to further this agenda, which ultimately, at the end of the day, is the communist, socialist, Bolshevist agenda. And I may sound like a anti-communist conspiracy theorist, but people, it's right there. It's hidden in plain sight. It's not even hidden anymore. They're hitting you over the head with it every single day. So it's really important to take notice. I wanted to bring up some interesting stuff here. So there is the war on poverty. This is where it all started. The war on poverty. Here's the good old boy himself, Lyndon Baines Johnson, born just up the road here in a town called Stonewall. If you blink, you'll miss Stonewall. I got pulled over by a cop in Stonewall about 2 weeks ago. It was hilarious. Hilarious. It's one of these small towns that got speed traps, speed zones. You got to watch your acceleration. I was doing 65 going out of town. Now remember, it's 7:30 in the morning and nobody's around in this one-horse town. And all of a sudden, coming in the other direction is a sheriff. And then I see his lights go on. I'm like, and he's in my rearview mirror. I'm like, oh shit, I think this guy's going to come get me. I'm just driving. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 60 miles an hour just in case. Sure enough, Boss Hog pulls me over. He was a Boss Hog guy. I'm telling you. He was right out of Boss Hog Central Casting. You must be in a hell of a hurry, Mr. Morris. Yeah, man, look, I'm sorry. I saw the signs. I tried to accelerate accordingly. So after a little deliberation, he decided to give me a warning. And it was so bizarre. It's like he just showed up like a cartoon character, I mean, some people show up like cartoon characters. It's like Scooby-Doo. It's the Scooby-Doo reality. And he's like, I'm gonna do you a favor today, Mr. Morris. I'm gonna let you go. I am warning you about the speeds. You're gonna be saving about $250. I'm just letting you know. I'm like, hey, thanks, man. Really appreciate that. I mean, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Oh, hey, can I get you a cup of coffee and a donut? Here, let me slip you a $5. No, I don't think it would work that way. Anyway, there's Johnson, and this is what we call a photo op. War on poverty. He's sitting down with some poor people, some poor white folk, discussing how hard their life is, how difficult it is. Lyndon Baines Johnson did pretty damn well for himself, didn't he now? You know what? You know what's interesting? These people may be poor by the standards of their time, but they don't look unhealthy. They may be poor, but they don't look unhealthy. So this is what was happening. The war on poverty. The war on poverty. This is the chart for the war on poverty. So it starts on January 8th, 1964. That is the proclamation. That is when the United States has said to the rest of the world, we're going to war. We're going to war on poverty. Poverty became this Hitlerian-like entity, a force with no face, but afflicting millions. It was a 19% poverty rate in America at that time, based on the economics of America during the 1960s. So in this day, the 8th of January, in the sign of Capricorn, the birthday of Elvis Presley and one David Bowie, the proclamation was stated. We're now at war. So look at this chart. It's very interesting. I pulled 7 a.m. Washington, D.C. It's a good time. You get up. Johnson probably got up, banged his secretary, had a cup of coffee, swam nude in the Oval Office pool, and said, you know, I'm going to declare war on poverty today. Because that's what he did. He did shit like that. If you missed my show on Johnson and his Johnson, apparently he had a Texas-sized Johnson, and heads of state would come over to the White House and meet with Johnson, and he would arrange it so that he would be in a White House pool, and his secretary would send them back, and they go back there, and he'd be naked. He'd come out of the pool, and he'd let him see his tool, because he thought that that was going to be a good way to get over on them, sort of the Neanderthal negotiation strategy 101. My dick is bigger than yours, so you better sit down and listen. So here we go. This is what happened. Look at what we've got here. Oh, how about that? South Node in Capricorn. South Node in Capricorn. What do we have now? South Node in Capricorn. True node in Pisces. Cancer. That's a good true node for poverty. We're gonna take on poverty. It's a Cancerian. It's a Cancerian concern. Poverty. It's all about the people. You see right here, that's your true node in Cancer right there. Family, home, Dust Bowl, nostalgic. We got a poverty problem here. I'm going to lift you out of it. What's interesting is that ultimately it was, out of the war on poverty, we have the welfare state. We have the Great Society. That's implemented a little bit later, and that's where the welfare state begins. So Kennedy is assassinated on 11/22, and not long after that, Johnson, in the wake of the trauma, says we're going to declare war on poverty. And everybody's walking around still reeling from the whole Kennedy thing. Like, okay, war on poverty, I get that. But look at where that South Node is. South Node, Sun conjunction, Mercury Capricorn, Mars in Capricorn. And they're pulling the strings. And look, we have the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. And this is being tapped into, right? It's being tapped into. Uranus, of all the planets, to me, Uranus represents some degree of radical socialism. So does Neptune in some ways, right? Neptune, everybody's theoretically equal. Uranus is the great disruptor. It's the great disruptor. So we have Sun trine, Uranus, Sun trine Pluto, tapping into that. Look, 8th house, other people's money and the government. Other people's money. That's our money, theoretically. And it's a disingenuous operation, to say the least. You got a Venus-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. There's a model for a new society here
squaring off against Neptune. Things aren't as they seem. With the Scorpio midheaven, it's the transformation of a culture. And with the moon in Scorpio, wide conjunction with Neptune, from here on out, boys and girls, it's about playing on people's emotions. It's virtue signaling. It's baked into the war on poverty. And we're going to use any means necessary with Jupiter and Aries squaring off against these planets. We're going to basically set the country on fire. We're going to pit people against one another. And the war on poverty would be used as a phalanx by Cloward Piven and others who are deeply immersed in the socialistic transformation of the United States. The war on poverty would be their main phalanx. It would be the tip of the spear, actually, for them. So what we have coming around here, oh, look at this. We're having a nodal return based on the war on poverty. Perhaps, as we go through this, people begin to see the patterns that are at work here and in place. They might wake up from their slumber before it is too late. And the clock is ticking. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. So when you see what's going on today, when you see what's happening with our world, with the weaponization of the homeless, with the weaponization of the displaced homeless from other countries, with the weaponization of essentially the commercial manufacture, addiction, opioid crisis, opioid war crisis. It's all part of a fairly multifaceted strategy to bring the ship down. And before they bring the ship down, they want to bring you down along with it, which means that they're going to demoralize you. They're going to get you to think that life sucks, isn't worth living. They're going to force you to deal with feelings of alienation and loss and dispossession and demoralization. So the country will go down much easier as a result of that. But here every day on 15 Minutes of Flame, we fight back to the best of our ability, and we fight back through the process of awareness. Right? We are aware to the best of our ability. We put the high beams on, and we fight back by taking care of ourselves, by taking care of our bodies, by taking care of our emotions. And this is the biggest thing you can do. I'm telling you right now. Today, every day is a living lab for me in how to deal with my emotions, how to deal with my signal. What do I let in? What do I let out? That is the work. That is the front lines of consciousness right now. And if you're watching this, you know that you're a part of it as well. So, I think it's about it today for the old Cloward Piven. You can look up more about it. Basically, it's a strategy that is used. It's a strategy that is using the system to derail the system. Brilliant. It's almost like cancer in some ways, you know. It's like all these cells that are metastasizing, that are out of control in our bodies. All right, let me just do a quick check-in with you guys. See where everybody's at, because I'm going to sign off here in a timely and clean manner. Okay, what do we have? We have amazing. There is hope. People are still growing something. It's been a weird gardening year. Some good gardening talk going on in the chat room. I will bring them when the weather cools. Good. You guys are talking about gardens, intermittent fasting. Love it. Absolutely love it. You guys have your own support system. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Man, that's good stuff. You guys are talking about planting, gardening. The creamies when it comes to gardening, the creamies are the cream of the crop. And then let's see what's going on over around the 15 side. Nobody present momentarily. It's been the answer since I checked here. Yeah, I say good morning. So, you know, I've got the other side. I think what's going to happen with the 15 minutes, I'm still going to continue to do it because it's actually a good archive, to be honest with you, of the stuff. I'm still going to do it, but I'll probably change my my provider when this contract is up. I've been looking into other people who do something similar, like Recast, and I'll continue to do this. Okay, I'm on out of here. Have yourself a really great day. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. We're in the game. You're here now. And, yeah, put your big boy and big girl boots on. That's the way it is. That's Virgo Talk for you this morning. You've been listening to Virgo Talk with Robert Phoenix. All right. Hey, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Crimmy's on Friday. We're going to take a trip back to Atlantis. We're bringing in another fellow traveler, our good friend Bonnie from Central America. All right. You guys take good care. And I'm out of here.